You ever have one of those days where you go out to fix something simple, a pothole, a rut, and it turns into the kind of mess you tell your grandkids about? If you ever have grandkids? Well, I spent a summer clearing a driveway and somehow ended up at the center of a neighborhood war that felt like a bad reality show, only uglier because these were people I waved to every morning. My name's Sam Walker. I live on the far end of a quiet lane in a place nobody would expect drama, Willow Hollow, and this is what happened when I decided to put down a few truckloads of gravel. We'd had a rough winter. The road to my place turns into a strip of mud whenever it rains, and my old pickup, my pride, and the thing that keeps my life running, was getting its undercarriage chewed up every other week. I called a local hauling company, got a permit from the county, yes, paperwork, because I like to do things right, and planned to patch what needed patching. I told my neighbor, waved at folks, the usual. I didn't know I'd be walking into a 3-act drama starring Gloria Ames, our HOA president, who's been in these parts long enough to think the place belongs to her. 3 sentences into the delivery, she was in the street, yelling like somebody'd stolen her Sunday. "You can't do that here," she shouted, like she'd invented the asphalt. The truck had the permit in its cab. I had the receipts in my pocket. Gloria had nothing but a sense of ownership of rules, of other people's business, and apparently, a talent for escalation. She stepped out in front of the truck to block it, and I think she expected the driver to stop and maybe feel small. Instead, the driver, who was doing a job he was owed for, backed up, misjudged the angle, and the road became a river of gray. Gravel poured across the cul-de-sac in a sheet, and for a beat it looked almost beautiful. Then Gloria was covered, sputtering, and the whole street laughed and then didn't, because no one wanted to be the one to say, "This is out of control." That was Act 1, the accident, the humiliation, the immediate crack in a neighborhood's polite mask. People took sides fast. Some thought Gloria had been dramatic, maybe she had, but the power she'd amassed over a decade as HOA president wasn't just about being loud. It was about influence, about who got to decide what a community looked like. For Gloria, a loose pile of gravel in front of a house she'd never liked probably felt like a threat to her order, and threats to people like her get handled with more than words. Act 2 is where things got ugly, and where I learned how far someone would go to save face. Gloria called an emergency HOA meeting 2 days after the dump. Picture a fluorescent-lit community center, folding chairs, and the kind of small-town civility that smells like stale coffee. She did what she does best: polished outrage, a stack of imaginary rules and threats. She demanded fines, suggested we were an eyesore for the whole development, and arranged for a crew to remove the obstruction at my expense. I laughed at first, because what else do you do when your political opponent insists you pay for their drama? But it turned out she'd already lined up people to make things worse. Overnight, someone glued a bogus violation notice to my mailbox. My mailbox, the one with my name on it, suddenly claimed I'd altered the easement or some legal word that required a lawyer to parse. Then there were the late-night stunts. Someone turned on the hose that drains into my ditch until it flooded the road I'd just fixed. Someone dumped flour on the gravel, so it looked like some ghost had staged a protest. It felt organized, personal, like an old-school smear campaign, and I started keeping receipts, screenshots, timestamps. Evidence, it turns out, becomes a strange kind of armor. The tension ratcheted up when Gloria rented a backhoe. I mean, who rents heavy machinery to move a pile of gravel? That's the question everybody asked. She said she was restoring order. I called it escalation. The first time the backhoe came in, it was showtime. Neighbors lined the street with their phones out, half of them for outrage, half for popcorn. Gloria climbed into the cab like a general, hair pinned up, sunglasses despite the overcast. She gave the operator a look, a few sharp words, the kind of offhand cruelty you see in movies where someone's about to pay for a mistake they had to make themselves, and the machine lurched. Machines don't know petty revenge. They follow physics. The backhoe tipped, a hydraulics line hissed, and instead of neatly scooping the gravel away, it heaved, coughed, and dumped half its load right back onto Gloria's side of the street, onto her azaleas, her precious azaleas, and into the lawn she'd spent a decade perfecting. For a second, the world teetered between slapstick and absurd justice, and Gloria stood there, green with hydraulic oil and fury, while the neighborhood camera feeds collected every humiliating angle. What I never expected, and what might surprise you, is how private the fight felt. On paper, Gloria had the narrative. She could shout safety, community standards, unauthorized alterations, and people who didn't want to get involved nodded and moved on. But when you sit up nights pulling footage, aligning timestamps from your doorbell cam, drone clips, driver logs, and receipts, you start to see patterns. Gloria's concerns followed projects she didn't oversee. Her outrage rose when her status might be questioned. Motive, as it turned out, was simple: control. She liked managing the wallpaper of the neighborhood, telling people how to plant, where to park, which mailbox looked appropriate. A few pallets of gravel felt like insubordination. So I built a timeline not because I wanted to punish her, but because I wanted the truth out where everyone could read it. I stitched together the dump, the bogus notices, the vandalism, the backhoe fiasco, Gloria's social posts that spun stories the opposite of what the cameras showed. I sent it to the HOA, to the county inspector, and reluctantly to a few neighbors I figured might be on the fence. That was the turning point. Give people an unedited sequence of events, and they stop repeating gossip. They start asking, who's telling the truth? Act 3 is the neighborhood moment. Meeting after meeting, people who'd kept quiet because they didn't want to pick sides started to stand up. Stories about petty fines and gatekeeping came out, and they weren't fun stories. People talked about how Gloria would threaten liens the way other people threatened to call a cab casually, and with the implied rightness of someone with power. The board voted, and in a straight, quiet way that felt both anticlimactic and cathartic, Gloria was removed from the presidency. The county fined her for unauthorized drainage changes, and the backhoe incident came with a bill for damage to public property. I didn't dance on her lawn not because I'm above it, but because it felt small. Justice, in our town, was administrative and awkward, not cinematic. We cleaned up the road. Crews came, fixed drainage, spread the gravel properly, and my pickup made it through one more winter without protest. I got an apology from one neighbor and a standing nod from another. Some friendships healed, some didn't. Gloria sold the house months later. Whether she was forced or decided on her own, it doesn't change that she left a hole in the community that took a while to patch. I learned something messy from the whole thing. First, people who want control will manufacture crises to validate themselves, and small communities are fragile when authority is concentrated in one loud voice. Second, patience and documentation are, strangely, practical weapons. And third, maybe the hardest part, is learning to separate a person from the pattern. Gloria wasn't a cartoon villain. She was someone who'd found a way to give her life meaning, however harmful that meaning became. That's not an excuse, it's observation. So where does this leave us? I still drive the same road. The gravel sun glints now like a small victory every time I pass it. But the last scene isn't neat, I don't want it to be. A few neighbors still whisper. A couple of folks moved away. Some say I should have handled it differently. Some say I should have pushed harder. That's life in a lane of imperfect people trying to live together. The real question that sticks with me, and the one I want to toss out to you, is this. When someone in your community crosses the line, do you call them out? Or do you let the peer pressure build until something breaks? And when the dust settles, how do we rebuild without repeating the same patterns of control? Tell me what you think. Was I right to document and confront, or should I have swallowed it and let sleeping dogs lie? Have you seen a small power drama like this play out where you live? And how did your town fix it or not? Drop your thoughts below, share your own stories. And if you've got a take on justice versus peace in neighborhoods, I want to hear it. If you liked this story, share it. If you didn't, tell me why. Either way, talk to me. I'm still trying to figure out how to be neighborly and firm at the same time. And maybe your comment will teach me something I've been too stubborn to learn.